Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Let's take this time to learn together. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Time with Tim. I'm Andy Carlson, and I'm excited to be here with Tim Fletcher and our special guest, Valerie Rubin. Valerie is a licensed rapid transformational therapist and host of the Anxiety Recovery podcast. She's also someone who's walked through her own severe anxiety, chronic pain, and disconnection. Now she devotes her work to helping others find their own way out of anxious attachment. In today's conversation, we'll hear Valerie's story and explore what it takes to heal anxious attachment, stop repeating painful patterns in relationships, and begin building emotional safety from the inside out. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Andy. I'm so excited to be on and share more today.
And so to start us off, what we'd love to do is to hear a bit about your early story. And so maybe what were some of the experiences or dynamics in your childhood that you now recognize as shaping your own vulnerability to anxiety and to chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. So to share a bit about my story. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I felt like I was living in a 9-year-old's body, chronic headaches, chronic neck pain, back pain, and no one could really figure out what was wrong. They just, what I didn't realize back then was that the anxiety wasn't just in my mind, it was in my body. I felt like I was doing all the right things. I was, doing everything that people were telling me to do, going to talk therapy, trying to fix myself. But I was still anxious. I still felt this deep core wound that I wasn't good enough. I kept ending up in relationships with people who were emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, and deep down unconsciously, I was replaying a pattern from my childhood that if I could just earn their love, I'd finally be worthy. And everything started to shift for me when I stopped trying to think my way out of my anxiety and my anxious attachment and started working with my body. That's when the pain started to disappear, and so did the compulsion to chase emotionally unavailable partners. And that's when I really discovered the work of anxious attachment, not just in my clients, but in myself. And so looking back, I realized that I was repeating the same patterns growing up. My parents were in a toxic, codependent, trauma-bonded relationship. And so after they separated for a short period of time, my mom became suicidal, then went back to him. And it really shook me because at that time when I was younger, I could never understand why people would feel the need to go back until I learned about anxious attachment. I learned that we outsource our safety because we don't feel it from within. And I realized that this wasn't just my pain. This was a legacy of unresolved trauma and anxious attachment. And so now I help people break those same patterns because love isn't meant to be a source of anxiety. It's supposed to really be that sanctuary of safety. And so, when you heal the nervous system, you heal that trauma and you heal that core wound that I'm not good enough, that's when everything really starts to shift.
So can you tell me just a little bit about mom and dad?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So both my parents are very codependent, very anxiously attached. And then my dad has more narcissistic tendencies. He himself has multiple sclerosis. So physically and emotionally, there was just a lot going on. And so that caused them to be very emotionally unavailable to me because they were emotionally unavailable to themselves as well.
Yeah. And mom?
Yeah, my mom was a chronic people pleaser, heavily in her fawn, and she herself really struggled with this belief that I wasn't good enough. And so within that, I also have 2 brothers, and one of them has autism. So I learned I have to be small. I don't want to add pain or chaos or stress to an already chaotic and stressful household. And so my mom was just really stuck in her patterns, and yeah, she just was chronically fawning and really was just not in her power. And so I internalized that and became that myself until I started to do somatic work.
So on outside in the community, how would others have perceived your family and your mom and dad? Were they kind of respected, looked up to?
Yes. So my dad also is a very successful man. He, also runs his own company. People kind of knew like my family, like my mom's family, even like his own family knew, okay, something's not like really right in his head. Like there's a lot going on in there. And, but business side, he was very respected. Like but on the outside, things looked great. People knew, okay, there was a bit of chaos, especially with my autistic brother. But yeah, it was a very different facade looking in.
And did mom ever finally leave dad totally, or did she
No,
keep coming? Really?
no, they're still together. They separated for about a few months at that initial time, and then she went back, and I don't think she'll ever leave. I don't think she's strong enough or has done the work to
Right,
develop that strength um, and safety within herself to feel okay to leave.
right. So bottom line is just kind of codependency at the next level.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So like to me, so you've got huge anxiety all the time as a child. Are mom and dad going to leave? Mom going to kill herself?
Yeah.
Am my needs going to get met? Nobody's there for me. I got a brother that's got autism that's getting all the attention. So
Mm-hmm.
then with that, you're trying to make yourself smaller to
Mm-hmm.
not add more stress. So you're
Mm-hmm.
suppressing your needs. Any part of that where you're kind of going to a belief that maybe you're part of the problem or you're too much
Oh
or
yeah. That was a big core wound of mine was that I was too much because my dad, like I've always been a very like bold,
right,
loud speaker. I'm very authentic. I've always really been like that until I was really conditioned out of that. My dad was a yeller, a lot of, stories like shut up, you're being too loud, you need to be quiet. And so of course I internalized that and wanted to become as small and shrink and yeah, just not
right,
adding to that chaos. But yeah, really that belief of I'm too much. Not sharing those vulnerabilities, not sharing when I was truly hurting. Because I
right.
learned that that wasn't going to be met with love and compassion and support.
So you're, to me, you're very authentic early on, then that's kind of
Hmm.
conditioned out of you. You're too much. Was there a part of you internally that began to really reject parts of yourself?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I definitely rejected my authenticity, rejected that loudness. I just chronically felt not good enough. And so for
right.
me, my coping strategies were fawning. I would
Yeah,
people please my dad, try and take care of my brother, try and be that peacemaker in the household. And so and then also becoming that perfectionistic protector part,
okay.
being that perfect daughter,
Yeah.
getting straight A's. That really, I got a lot of validation from academic validation as well.
So, so very much externalizing where your value comes from internal to
Mm-hmm.
external,
Mm-hmm.
fawning, but yet believing this core shame belief that you're not good enough the way you are. You can't be
Mm-hmm.
authentic. You're too much. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, you got a whole bunch of kind of that complex
Mm-hmm.
trauma stuff happening inside of you. And then
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned also that you've got your initial templates of relationships are basically codependent, narcissistic, anxious, codependency stuff that is your normal, that's all you know, etc. So you head out into life basically repeating that.
Mm-hmm.
What what kind of brought you to the place where you began to realize there's something wrong with what I've been believing and the templates and this isn't all on me. There's something more
Mm-hmm.
going on here. What
Mm-hmm.
kind of brought you to that place?
So, two things that brought me to that place. I knew even since I was a child, my family dynamic is not normal.
Okay.
Like, my mom's parents were very healthy. Like, they had a beautiful relationship, and they were so loving. And my aunt had a wonderful healing relationship with her husband, and they're still together. And so I knew like something was wrong with the dynamic. I knew something was wrong with my dad, even when I was really young. Um, I don't think Andy has mentioned I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. And when I was doing training and I used to do a lot of hypnotherapy, and I would go back to scenes where I was 3 years old being like, why is my dad not helping my mom? Like something is wrong, something is not right. And then, you learn that, okay, this is somewhat familiar. And then I was around 19 when I saw my first therapist. And I actually wasn't seeing my therapist really for anxiety. I realized I cut off a best friend and I wanted to just make sure I was processing it well. And then we were talking about family dynamics, and she's like, there's a lot here. There's a lot more here than just what meets the eye. And so I'm so grateful that I had that person to reflect that back, that like there is deeply rooted issues at play that are really impacting your relationships, your physical pain, your mental health. Because for me, my parents were both anxious stress balls all the time. So I didn't fully realize, oh, maybe this isn't fully normal to feel so anxious and chronically stressed and believing the worst case scenario in every situation and moment. And so until that therapist really showed that to me, I didn't even fully realize the depth of how wrong everything was.
Right. Which is to me so normal. We
Yes.
grow up in it,
Yes.
it's our normal. We don't even
Mm-hmm.
begin to understand how deeply dysfunctional it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I've seen over and over again, and here's what I'm suspecting with you, but I want you to corroborate it or refute it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you get that insight from a therapist that, hey, my family's not totally normal, but yet you still go out and develop relationships, romantic relationships that basically mimic or repeat what you grew up with. Is
Mm-hmm.
that so? You got an insight, but you haven't implemented all of the specifics of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that about
Oh
right?
yeah, 100% at that time. I remember because it was all talk therapy, and talk
Yeah,
therapy can be a great like beginner step, but it's not healing those core wounds,
exactly.
those patterns that are living in your nervous system and your body, because your nervous system, it's what's familiar is safety towards you. So I would be in back-to-back relationships with emotionally unavailable people. I would think of their potential, hold on to hope, believing the best in them, because I had to do that in childhood. I had to believe that my parents were going to change in order to feel safe, in order
Exactly.
to survive that type of dynamic. And so yeah, and then it got to a really um difficult point where I was living with a partner and he ended up being narcissistic. And then after I was out of it, I was talking at this time, then I started somatic therapy, and she was like, this is a trauma bond. And I was like, holy moly. And so then that really began
Good.
really healing that anxious attachment and where these patterns are stemming from, healing them through the body, because you can't just say, I'm just going to meet a secure, healthy partner, because you'll just sabotage it or it won't feel safe. And you just genuinely, your brain, your reticulating activator system won't even see those types of partners,
Exactly.
or it'll be boring.
Yeah. Okay. So, couple things just to continue with that train of
Mhm.
thought. So, what I've seen over and over again is so most people with kind of anxious attachment end up being attracted to people with avoidant attachment, or, but they're both emotionally unavailable. They've got attachment issues, but then they can switch back and forth between anxious and avoidant. So it depends
Mhm.
on what day, what's going on. They can be anxious or they can be avoidant.
Mhm.
Expand on that in your own experience.
Yes. So for me, what was keeping me stuck in my patterns was I wanted to blame my
Right.
partners. Well, if you just did the work, if you just saw a therapist, if you just did that. But no, like you were the one who was staying in this dynamic because, yeah, those protector parts. And for me, it was really that fear of abandonment,
Yes.
and that was stemming from childhood, right? And
Yeah.
so, of course, then it's reactivated in these relationships with these avoidant partners because my dad, I think, was a lot more on the avoidance side. And so, of course, I was trying to rewrite that program,
Mhm.
but adding
Mhm.
to Tim's aspect with people who are anxiously attached, they're hyper attuned and hyper available to the other person, which makes them unavailable to themselves. And they think,
Exactly.
well, I'm showing up in this relationship, I'm giving so much. No, you're lacking that internal safety. You're lacking that. So, of course, now in relationships, you're over giving and you're yourself emotionally unavailable. And then they think that, no, I'm being available. You're not. You're extremely avoidant to yourself. And so people who are anxiously attached want to point the finger, but it takes two to tango.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said. Okay, so let me go back to childhood, and I just want to pick up on what I think might be very helpful for people. So, to me, what happens when people have kind of the fears of abandonment and anxiety of not sure what to expect with mom and dad, with brother, all of that, my needs going to get met. So you got this ball of anxiety that you can't resolve. Um, but the brain is still looking for a way to resolve it. It just can't resolve it in a healthy way that's going to make it go away. So it begins to develop almost fantasy solutions to resolve it. So if I only did this, then that would fix it. And you develop belief systems around that. If I do these behaviors, that'll give me hope. That'll make it all go away. That'll fix it. And so you end up with these almost like limbic brain solutions that make me feel better in the moment, and therefore I think I'm resolving my anxiety, but actually in the long run, it's only making it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that from your own experience?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up because this is also what keeps people stuck in toxic relationships as they have this fantasy or potential that this person is going to leave. And so one of my things when I was really young that for me was really keeping me in that fantasy loop, it really helped me to survive. But it was like I I'm not getting this anxiety resolved. And so I was just wanting to grow up very fast because that part of me was like, I'm going to get married. I'm going to get someone who finally meets all my needs. And then I won't experience this lack of love, this void in my heart, in my soul, because I didn't get any of these needs met. Then I will feel better. When I get a job and make a certain amount of money, then I'll feel better. Because in my family household, that was really conditioned. You get married to a rich husband, they make a lot of money, then you don't have to worry about money. And then that also was a core thing of mine as well. And that's what was keeping me stuck because I was just wanting to have that fantasy when someone who's, you know, rich or whatever, that's not going to solve your internal wounds or your attachment style.
Yeah. So again, to me, uh, like I'm glad we're talking about this because I think so many people don't see that. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is actually a hindsight type of insight that you gain into your anxiety that you go, wow, I can't believe I kept having hope based on a fantasy solution that really wasn't realistic at all. Um, did you do so you tried to become like the hero child, perfect grades, all of that, that's going to get my needs met, that's going to reduce the stress in the family, so that'll reduce my own. So you're continually looking to external things to provide safety, to provide a solution. Um, when did you begin to realize that you couldn't outsource your anxiety solutions to somebody else or to some magic solution and that you had to do internal work?
Mm. So I started doing somatics and hypnotherapy around my early 20s. But when it really became apparent that something external is not going to fix internal, a few things. When I started my business, when I was making a lot of money, because I thought, oh, when I make a lot of money, that anxiety will go away. Absolutely not. Even if you have more success, more love, it's going to amplify whatever is already unresolved. And so for me, that was the catalyst when I started to make a lot of money and that anxiety still wasn't going away. And then also when I got into a healthy relationship, my first one, I realized, wow, like I've been pedestalizing romantic relationships so freaking much. I thought they were going to be the answer, and it wasn't. Like it just amplified already what's in here, what's in there that needs to
Right.
be worked on. So those two aspects.
Was there an element? So what I find with so many people that have had anxiety since pre-verbal even, um, is that it becomes actually their nervous system's default setting. So
Yep.
once they get to healthy, their nervous system wants to go back to anxiety because it feels something's wrong. I don't feel safe. Something's off. So let's go back to worry about something, create some chaos, get in a relationship, anything that produces the feelings. And they're often even, it's a subconscious dynamic that's happening. You don't even realize what you're doing, but you're trying to recreate that default setting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that from your own experience?
Oh yeah, I actually have never shared this story on a podcast before, but my somatic therapist brought this up to me. So it was like a few years ago at this point. I was doing a lot of healing work and I was starting to feel safe in my body and I was in my first healthy relationship. And I, at the time, did not want to get pregnant. You know, I running a business, I'm not in that stage of life where I want that yet. And I would have unprotected sex. And then I would be worried, oh my God, am I going to get pregnant? And my somatic therapist was like, is someone creating her own chaos to stay in the familiar?
Exactly. Exactly. So if I let me just kind of
Mm-hmm.
switch directions here, Valerie. I'm loving this discussion. So what we know in kind of healing trauma is you can't heal trauma unless the person feels safe. And so
Right.
often the therapist has to provide, like a parent, an external environment where they feel safe, they can connect emotionally with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And many resist that because that actually feels
Mm-hmm.
unsafe initially. But
Mm-hmm.
then what you're doing with the clients is working towards, you have to provide safety within your own body.
Mm-hmm.
You have to provide tools that help you learn to set boundaries to keep yourself safe, to visualize, and so that you can go to a safe place internally. All of those different tools that begin to happen. But if you don't develop the skills and tools to create safety, so you're not always outsourcing safety to everybody else, you're never going to deal with the anxiety. So to me, the key thing that you mentioned that I really want you to expand on is a lot of people, when they think of anxiety, just think of creating emotional safety, and they don't realize that they've got body anxiety. And so that becomes a huge issue, is for them to create kind of the body sensations that, and actually they need to start there. Um, so can you again expand on that from your experience?
Absolutely. So we don't just want to heal the trauma. We also need to teach the body that it is safe and the trauma is over. And so this also means focusing on expansion, focusing on safety, and expanding on that. I've made for clients different meditations to self-source that safety. So for them, it's imagining, okay, what is my safe place? What is, and for me, that's the beach. I love the beach. And for some people, it's like, oh, when I'm with my animal, it's like, where can we resource that safety? And so in my practice, I utilize something called brain spotting, and we can get into that a little bit later. But brain spotting ultimately is implying that where we look affects how our nervous system feels. So if you're working with someone or talking to someone that's looking up, down, to the side, they are processing something. So it can do that for activating the trauma or finding that spot, that's that trauma spot that's located through the body. So let's say if you have anxiety, you're triggered when your partner goes out of town, you're really scared they're going to leave or they're going to cheat on you. Let's say that. You know, I feel this internal anxiety in my chest. I feel tension in my head. I feel scared shitless. So I have them look around the room, find a spot that amplifies this feeling of anxiety, and then we're locating where that trauma memory is stored and releasing it through the body. And so that's a way we can heal the trauma, but we can also utilize that for feeling safe. So, okay, what does it look like when you feel even 1% more safe? Maybe I'm breathing deeper, my chest is open, my back feels relaxed, my muscles feel loose. Okay, where in the room, when you look from left to right, do you find that feeling of safety? And then I also anchor them into maybe a body part that feels even 1% more safe, neutral, or grounded. Maybe that's their left pinky toe, right? And then focusing on that while they're looking at the spot and creating that's starting to create that familiarity of safety. And then as they continue practicing that, resourcing safety, they realize this is coming from within, not externally. Now their nervous system starts to become familiarized with these new feelings, expansion. And now when they're in relationships, dating, they will now feel repulsed by emotionally unavailable and narcissistic people because their new familiar is not the same as was it what it was in childhood.
So, love it. Now give a realistic timeline on how long it takes for that to happen with a person.
I love this question because everyone, it could look completely different. So for some people, it could take a few weeks. Some people, it could take a bit longer. But I find that everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but everyone can have access to some sort of safety, whether that's I'm looking at my dog, I'm looking at this lipstick that brings me joy, something. So, but a realistic timeline, I would say when we really get into it, to start to feel safe within those safe feelings, I would say a few months.
Yeah.
At least. But also it is very contextual with how their trauma history is, what their complex trauma looks like. But typically when you start to consistently practice these tools, it will be a lot quicker. And also that's where I start clients. I start them with that. I start them with safety, really creating that within their body, learning how to regulate their nervous system, what tools to specifically utilize in flight, anxiety, freeze, this was like depression, fawning, people pleasing, and then anger, how to safely process those. And it's not about getting rid of them or these like loud sensations. It's about supporting your body and feeling safe with this, because a regulated nervous system is not one that's calm 100% of the time. It's learning that we can ride those waves, and the distance to coming back into safety is shorter. It's a shorter amount of time.
Okay, so I'm going to just keep building on this because this is getting to me the heart of it. So, to me, safety, the first thing people have to understand is there's no magic fix. There's a lot of hard work that you have to do. So you're retraining your nervous system. You're creating kind of somatic safety for yourself. But then to me, there's a couple other pieces that people have to be aware of. Is you can be a pro at creating safety for yourself internally, but if you're still in an abusive narcissistic relationship, you just keep undermining the stuff by putting yourself back into an unsafe external environment. So you've got an internal environment and an external environment that you now have to manage, and the external one requires boundaries and all of that. But then for many people growing up, especially with abuse, sexual abuse, all of that, is they've learned to shut down their neuroception, their gut, their intuition, because nobody believes them, nobody listens to them. So why listen to themselves? And so now they actually ignore their intuition, their gut, and they walk into danger and don't even realize they're walking into danger. And then they get hurt again. And all of a sudden their anxiety's back. So like there's layer after layer of things that all piece together to create safety for people. That you got to revive an intuitive system that you've shut down. You've got to set boundaries that fawners don't like to do because people might get mad at you if you say no. You can't people please everybody. So speak to some of those other layers that people need to be aware of.
Yes. So starting off, these things that I'm mentioning, your body is going to resist the absolute F out of it. It's going to not want to do that every day because it's trying to recreate the familiar. Our
Right.
body correlates uncertainty or the unknown with danger, and that includes healing. That includes maybe that safer, more healthy partner. It's going to signal danger when there isn't. And so starting with people pleasing, I find that this isn't talked about enough. You will feel a ton of guilt when you
Yeah.
start to set boundaries. You're going to feel like a bad person. You're going to feel, and you will lose some relationships because the same relationships typically that you've made in survival will not last out of survival.
Exactly.
So that's also a piece that is really challenging and can be really heartbreaking. But it's important to know that you deserve to have relationships that can meet you where you're at. Other things with trusting your intuition and your gut, you have to first feel safe. I literally was telling a client yesterday with your intuition, she was like, how do you know the difference between intuition and hypervigilance? First, ask yourself, am I in a regulated state? Am I in a safe place in general? Like, is this place safe? And regulating yourself. And then if you're still, feeling fear or your gut is telling you something, then listen to it. But it will feel like maybe I'm making it up. Maybe I'm crazy. A lot of people feel that way. Maybe I'm just crazy. But no, I've been on a good amount of first dates. After going through everything and making sure that I've been working on myself as I've gone into the dating space, I can sense within the first 10 minutes if this will make a good partner, A, or B, even make it to the second date. I don't ever go on a second date with someone who I have this off feeling about. And I'll use an example because this, I think, demonstrates the power of listening to your intuition. And for me, I work virtually, so I will go on dating apps. And so I was on a dating app, matched with this guy, and I like to have a phone call first before meeting them for safety purposes. And I think it's great because then you can save time in the first 10 minutes. You can see if this person even resonates with you. So I match with this guy. We get along great, like over messaging, and then we talk on the phone, and some of the shit that he is saying is weird, makes me uncomfortable, feels really off, and even like some negging was happening. And so I just blocked. I was just like, no. And he found my business online, wrote a negative review on Google, and he puts like 1 star, very bad experience, very rude, and like it's one of them. So he left 2. One of them is still on because Google wouldn't remove it. So that's just someone who is emotionally healthy wouldn't be wanting to almost get revenge on someone.
Exactly. 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 Okay, I want to add another layer here that I think, again, people often aren't even aware of. So, to me, in childhood, within like a complex trauma family, so you got mom and dad in a codependent relationship, they can't deal with the children's needs or the children's emotional issues. So they actually kind of gaslight the children. Oh, you're not feeling
Mm-hmm.
that, or it's not that big a deal,
Mm-hmm.
all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So the child is feeling anxiety, but they learn to gaslight themselves. So they learn to, I'm feeling anxiety, but I minimize it. So it's not that bad. I'm going to push it to the subconscious. So they've got this awareness of anxiety, but a minimizing of anxiety that they don't even know that they're doing, the dynamics that are causing that. And so what I find with a lot of people is they'll come into program and they'll admit they have anxiety issues. But then when you actually want them to feel it and actually want them to begin to explore it, then they go to minimizing and actually kind of denying a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what what I want people to realize is to actually go there to deal with anxiety is going to initially create more anxiety, which you've just
Yes.
said. but that's not going to last forever. That's just a very temporary thing as you honestly face it. So their approach has been, the way to get rid of anxiety is to not be totally honest about it. And what we're saying is the way to deal with anxiety is be totally honest about it, but that's going to actually create more anxiety for a little while. But you're going to learn the tools to deal with it. So what have you found helps clients kind of get through that very critical getting honest about their anxiety and actually feeling it?
Mm. And I'm so glad you brought this up because it's completely unconscious. People don't even realize they're doing it because they've been so gaslit. For me, my mom would just say, like, you're fine, like, you're
Yeah,
okay, like, everything's gonna be fine. But no, I was feeling this internal anxiety that was screaming at me. Like, I wasn't fine. Like, stop telling me that I am fine when I'm not fine. And so for me, I didn't fully even realize that I was incorporating that pattern until my friend was like, hey, you're saying that you're fine, but you're actually not fine. Like, I can feel there's something off here. And then I feel like I'm gaslighting myself, or I can feel your anxiety. Like, what's going on? And then within that, I would practice saying out loud what I felt. And like to her. And that was very uncomfortable at first, extremely uncomfortable, because then I find once you say it out loud, you then can't run from it. At least that's my
exactly.
experience. I mean, you can absolutely if you just keep yourself in the story instead of being with the emotion. But I find that when you just say it out loud, then it's like, oh, it's here. I can't ignore it now. And so, and then also another way clients do this is toxic positivity. Everything's
Yeah,
fine, you know, just looking at the positives. And it's like, no, like, what's actually happening in your body? What's
exactly.
going on in that chest? What's going on in your heart? What are you actually feeling when
Exactly.
this is happening? And so, ways that I have clients start out with is, so I have a session with clients that is all about connecting to the body. And it's called the body connection session, where we're doing somatic exercises to get connected to your body. You will feel more sensations, but also most clients describe it as, this is the most calm I've felt once we really get them connected. But at first they're like, oh, I notice my neck is more tense. I notice this. I notice that. It's like, good, because we're dissolving that numbness and we're dissolving those protector parts that
Exactly.
are standing in the way of you being connected to that anxiety, connected to those parts of your body that don't feel pleasant.
Okay, I want to pursue that in a minute, but I want to add one other layer here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what I have found over the years is there's, for most people, a definite connection between anxiety and shame core beliefs. And so when you want to heal anxiety, they just want a quick fix. And they want to outsource that and somebody else to fix them. And what you have to get them to see is you've got to change your core beliefs and be willing to respect yourself enough to stand up for yourself and demand that others respect you, or
Mm-hmm.
else you're going to continue to be in unsafe relationships where you're disrespected and ignored, etc. Um, so, can you just speak again to helping people identify that shame core belief and
Mm-hmm.
beginning to actually heal the self respect that stands up for itself?
Absolutely. And that's such a great point. And I feel like a lot of people are very aware of their core beliefs. Maybe they're not consciously super aware, but all of my clients, even in their first session, will outright tell me, I don't feel good enough. I
Right.
feel something is wrong with me. That is the core piece. And I feel that every single person with trauma, and even people who haven't experienced complex trauma, we've been so conditioned by society. Something's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not this enough. And so anxiety and shame are completely correlated. And literally, that's what it is. Clients will tell me frequently, I'm just trying to get rid of this anxiety. But it's like, what if you sitting with that anxiety, just sitting with it? That is the most loving thing you can do because you've taught yourself to self abandon. People will be like, I want to become securely attached. Why do you actually want to be securely attached? A lot of them feel like, oh, once I do the healing work, then I'm finally lovable. You've always been lovable. it's just protector parts, shame, these core beliefs that have infiltrated that. And
Yeah.
so starting out, it's one, making them aware of their beliefs. Two, I also utilize hypnotherapy. When was the first time you acquired this belief that you weren't good enough, that something's wrong with me, that I'm not lovable? Because that is a program. And if that can be learned, it can also be unlearned.
Excellent. Yeah.
Especially when you're from 0 to 7 years old. Your brain is in a theta brainwave state, meaning if something happens, a trauma, or, even like your dad gave your sister a balloon and they didn't give you one, you can internalize from that, I'm not good enough. He didn't give it to me. Something's wrong with me. Why didn't he give me one? And so we don't have any logic available online when you're that young. So you just take these beliefs in like a sponge.
Exactly.
And that's why they feel so automatic. And so it's then reprogramming every single day, utilizing hypnosis recordings, either right before they go to bed or right when they wake up, because then you're in a theta brainwave state. Then it's so much easier to bypass that critical mind and those wired beliefs in your, not just your mind, in your nervous system, in your body. Then when you start to rewire that, you naturally will have more self-respect because you've gotten to the core of it, you've gotten to that shame, and you've realized that's a program. That's not actually who I am.
Excellent. Okay, another layer, and then I want to do a practical thing with you and Andy.
Mm-hmm.
But so to me, anxiety begins for a child within the home environment. But what people really need to take into consideration is that we're also affected by the cultural environment. So that, like, if you're a black kid in a white neighborhood that's racist, then you're going to probably have anxiety. If you get a bully at school or a teacher that's kind of narcissistic, then you're going to probably have anxiety. But beyond that, like, to me, a lot of girls growing up develop anxiety about their bodies, about their appearance, just because of cultural Hollywood type of things. Then right now, to me, which is a huge thing, and you don't have to speak to this directly, but it's just politically within the US, there's a lot of anxiety that's happening that just has to be called what it is. It's fear-driven stuff that's creating anxiety. So what I'm really getting at is that we got to look at anxiety beyond just the home dynamics. We got to see there's a cultural piece here that you need to understand at the bare minimum in order to be able to understand how it's affecting you and what parts are kind of being called into play to help deal with it. Again, just speak to that for a bit, Valerie, as to kind of what approach you use with clients in that area.
Yeah, it's first recognizing what story have you started to believe about yourself based on your cultural. For a lot of women, like I've had clients in India and different countries where they learned women are not to be angry. You are not allowed to be angry. It's actually unsafe to be angry. They learn that their voice is not heard. They are seen and not heard. Certain Asian cultures, they are taught to be as small and skinny as humanly possible. So that can bring up a lot of anxiety with the body image. And even with cultural aspects, I've had, like, even using the opposite of what you mentioned, I had a client who was extremely, extremely tall, and he was living in the Bahamas, and he was in a predominantly African American school, and he was super tall and white, and he had red hair. So for him, he stuck out like a sore thumb, and he was bullied, and he had this real deep core shame that something is wrong with me. It's not safe to be seen.
Yeah.
And it runs really deep. And so we want to first realize what is the story that I'm telling myself. And that's the important part of having a coach or therapist, because they can mirror back, hey, that is a cultural thing.
Exactly.
That's not normal, because they think that is completely normal. And then they don't even realize I'm suppressing anger. And then they're living with a health condition now. So the approach that I use is really just mirroring back what is normal and what is not, and rewiring those beliefs that they created and really healing those traumas that were created in their body. Because cultural aspects are very real, and I'll just share a personal example that I used to not share. I am Jewish. And so when everything was happening on October 7th, I had this huge fear of being found out that I was Jewish. I was afraid that literally Nazis were going to come in and kill me. 95% of my family passed away in the Holocaust. It's a very ancestral, deep thing. And so I received a brain spotting session on it, and this fear of being Jewish, it was terrifying, because also anti-Semitism, like the rate has been increased by like 600% since October 7th. Like it also happens externally. People and even other therapists that I'm friends with that are Jewish have told me they've been kicked out of groups. They've been kicked out of practices because they are Jewish. So it is a very real thing that was causing a lot of fear for me. And so I did brain spotting on it, found that part in my body, and the shit that I was seeing, I saw myself rescuing my family. My great grandfather, he was one of 11 children. Only him and his brother survived. I saw in my mind, with my eyes open, by the way, with brain spotting, I saw myself rescuing all of them. And I've always felt this deep, deep connection with my great grandfather ever since. He was very religious. He was Orthodox. That was a big part of his identity. And when I healed that fear, I was able to be more open about being Jewish. I was able to wear my Jewish star without feeling fearful. I started to share more on Instagram about his story. And so it was starting to become deeply feeling safe internally. And
Yep.
I just had this belief that now I have this belief. It's like, okay, if you want to kill me because I'm Jewish, like I'm still going to be myself. Like you can go ahead and do that, but I'm going to almost make my grandfather, my great grandfather proud, and continue this voice, using my voice to spread awareness around these cultural and religious aspects. Especially religious trauma is a big one. A lot of clients who are Catholic, they've had so much shame around intimacy, so many aspects. So having that cultural and religious lens is huge. But really what I'm helping them approach is healing what that cultural and religious environment caused you to believe about yourself. Because my
Exactly.
family was also very fearful about sharing that they're Jewish. They would tell me, do not share anything about your Judaism on social media, not on your podcast. Like, you could get yourself killed, like, very fear based.
Yep.
And so it's really coming back to that center of who you are and knowing that I am divinely protected.
Yep.
And if that is my way I'm supposed to go, then it's out of my control.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful stuff. One other thing before I'm going to get you to do something with Andy. So a lot of people, I think, when they think of their anxiety, again, just think of it in terms of this uncomfortable emotion they want to get rid of. And they don't realize kind of the cortisol being released in the brain that then is not being resolved or released from the body. And then it begins to affect the body's immune system, the body's organs. It begins to affect these negative repercussions as far as your physical health, etc. Can you just speak to that from kind of what you've seen as the connection between physical health issues versus anxiety?
Absolutely. Our mind and body are not two separate things, as mainstream psychology wants you to believe. For me, that was my whole story. I thought something was wrong with my body. I was living, it felt, in a 90-year-old's body in my early 20s. It was terrifying going back to back to back to doctors, them not knowing what was wrong. I remember telling my grandfather at one point, I almost wish I had a tumor so I could know what's going on with my body, that something's actually wrong. But no, once I started to actually work with the body, start to feel safe in my body, knew how to regulate myself, the anxiety started to reduce by a lot, then the chronic pain slowly went away. And I was also doing all the right things, seeing a chiropractor, change my diet. Nothing externally can heal your body if your mind is not right, if your subconscious is not right, if you're in a soul-sucking environment, in a soul-sucking job, in a toxic relationship. A lot of clients will tell me that they have had so many health issues. About 80% of my clients have had IBS
Yep.
because the gut and the brain aren't separate. They're the same, they're interconnected. So I would say how to differentiate the two is if you've been feeling regulated, you've been feeling really happy, you've really been enjoying your life, and you still have this physical health problem, okay, then that's something to look at. But a lot of the time, it does have to do with your mental health and what's going on in your brain with all the cortisol. And I saw a reel the other day, and this girl was like, he would have made you ugly. He would have made you ugly. Stay away. It was for the best. And it's literally true. Like, cortisol swells your body, swells your face. When I was in a toxic relationship, and I was living with him, I had cystic acne all over my face. I was having chronic UTIs. I was having gut issues. I was honestly a mess. Like, my body was not in the right space because before meeting him, I was already working on a lot of the anxiety. And then when I was with him, it would like flare up. And then after I stopped dating him, the cystic acne went away. I wasn't so inflamed anymore. The pain, I wasn't having UTIs anymore. Your cortisol will affect not just your brain or how you feel, how you look, and something that not enough people talk about as well. I'm trying not to get too off topic, but when you've experienced narcissistic abuse or complex trauma, what ends up happening is your amygdala, which is where your fear and anxiety is stemming from, that literally becomes larger to adapt. And then your hippocampus, which is in charge of logical thinking, rationalization, solving complex problems and focusing, that starts to shrink. So this is why a lot of people will tell me, I think I have ADHD. They can be very correlated. And I myself was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was put on Adderall and all these different medications. And it was never about that. Your brain also learns to tune out.
Yep.
Because if fight, flight, freeze, and fawn aren't fully effective, you're going to tune out the external environment. And also, what a gift that our brain and our nervous system knows how to survive. People look at their protector parts and these aspects of themselves and think, something is wrong with me. No, your body is actually designed to keep you alive, and it's really trying so hard to keep you alive. What if we can thank our nervous system for that and realize, hey, it just needs some TLC right now?
Exactly. Very well said. Thank you. So, well, you were off camera earlier. Andy and I were chatting, and Andy, I'm going to make an assumption here, but Andy's doing some therapy stuff right now. So basically what he said is when he gets to a really, really quiet place internally, he can hear a 1-year-old crying with anxiety. Does that say that correctly, Andy?
And so if I'm kind of trying to be or coming into a calm space and becoming more embodied, a lot of times, like I have to do guided meditations often because if I do silent meditations, there's like something coming out of me that what what I associate it with would be like, yeah, a baby just crying in anxiety or pain or terror. And so there's
Mm.
like a kind of just like this part that will, when I'm quiet, this part is not quiet.
And Andy, um, so when Andy first came to our program, one of the things that he talked about a lot, and I think it's connected, is just he didn't feel emotions. So
Mm.
what's the technical term again, Andy? You can explain it.
Or the technical term, I don't. I mean, I was like very dissociated from my body. I always considered myself to be a bodiless head, and so I was very much like OCD, anxiety, overthinking, and then everything else was just kind of suppressed and like often like absent-minded professor. And so I'd be in my brain either thinking in fantasy or calculating, like working on things, even while I'm like walking and in the world, I'm like just kind of like checked out. Uh, and so mostly living in my brain. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing has been coming back to the present, coming back to the body and being more in that. But there still is a head, kind of a head body disconnection, which has been something I've been focusing on recently.
So if Andy came to you and just said something's a bit off with me, and I've had this little experience that when I get quiet, something inside of me gets loud, and it's a 1 year old kind of in terror. Walk us through kind of what how you would start.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love this question. I I love this question, and I just navigated a client through a very similar thing yesterday. So I'm so glad you brought this up. So, what I would first have you do is tune in. So when I'm quiet and this 1-year-old has anxiety and I feel this terror, where do you start to feel this terror in your body?
I would say that it's kind of like centered in the throat, but then also like there's like I carry constant tension in my head, like primarily in my forehead, like kind of on the sides. But then I think when I focus on here, there's more of like kind of like in the back as the tension shifts to the back. And so
That okay, this is fabulous. Um So I'll first have you tune into so the throat tension, tension in your head, tension in your forehead, the back of the head. How intense does it feel on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most intense?
I mean, in this moment when I try to kind of check into it, I'd say right now it's like maybe a three.
Mm,
When I was doing this, I was like, so what Tim was talking, what I'd shared with him is I've been doing some of Betty Martin's work,
mm-hmm.
Wheel of Consent stuff, and I've been getting into my body more, and like my head is at some points has kind of shut off, and I've gone into my body. But I think I was doing an exercise there, and like came up, it was like maybe a seven or an eight, like that it got like really loud. I was able
Okay.
to the thing I liked about it was I was able to sit with it at that time. It's normally something that I kind of run away from and avoid. But but yeah,
Okay, yeah. So I'll invite you to close down your eyes. Does that feel safe for you? And I want you to bring up when you were working on this before, when it was at a level 7. You feel anytime that you're quiet, you feel this 1-year-old has so much terror, anxiety. You feel he's crying. I want you to bring up a memory that brings that more to the surface.
what I noticed like somatically just doing this is there's like a kind of like a cold tension pulling and like above my heart up into my chest, really into my throat. But then also it's like the back of my throat, the roof of like it is kind of like that crying, you know, where the cry would come from. It's like the back of my top of my mouth, back of my throat area, where there's a lot of tension with it as well.
Okay. Okay. And so I want you to now, I'll invite you to just slowly open up your eyes. And I want you to look from the left to the right. And I want you to find a spot that amplifies these feelings of this cold tension in your throat, in your heart, the back of the throat.
Kind of when I'm looking off to the left, it does feel a little bit tighter, stronger.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it feels tighter and stronger there. Mm-hmm. And I want you to continue looking there. And I want you to just witness if any sensations, any emotions, or any memories continue coming up.
This is actually there's a thing that I remember of so my brother and I have never been close
Mhm.
uh since a young age, and kind of one of the memories that I have is there's a period, maybe I might have been 6 or 7 and he's 2 years younger than me, so he maybe was 4 or 5. I was somewhere between 5 and 8, and uh I'd already learned at that time that it was safer to be quiet and small. And so for a brief period, mom and dad had gotten a new bed. And so he and I moved out of like bunk beds and we actually like shared a bed for a little period of time. And as little brothers, like we would talk to each other, but talking after going to bed was evil and bad and a punishable crime. And so, like, what I remember one night is kind of like he and I were in there connecting. So it may have been one of the last times we actually did connect. Uh, and then dad would come in to when he was going to bed to kiss us goodnight and say a quick prayer over us. And that was often a time to actually scream at us and hit us one last time in the day. And so we were talking and he opened the door and he's like, I don't want to hear another peep out of you. He shouts at us. And little brother, who hasn't been hit as much at this point, didn't know enough to shut up, and he just lets out a peep. Uh, and so, like, I think like part of the reason why it's to the left is like that's where I was on the right side of the bed, and so he was on the left. So this is like one of the memories. Like a lot of my memories of connection with my siblings always end with some form of, let's say, physical violence, because we had fun or we got dirty or wet playing outside. And so, yeah, so dad like flew into a rage and kind of went off on my little brother while I was there. And so, yeah, that's one of the memories that comes up.
What do you feel in your body as you're describing this?
I mean, I feel a sadness. There's something like one of the things that I've worked through and I've grieved is, my most of my family has an inability to connect with other people, and I definitely did as well. And so one of the things that I've grieved, but I still do have sadness for, is that kind of both that loss of connection. And so I kind of feel like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff kind of from my solar plexus on up, there's a lot of kind of tension and some turmoil, and then definitely like tension in my head, a tentativeness, but then also, I think like I know that like there's like a block there of like I've like blocked out what happened next. Like I was able to kind of like shut myself down and out and,
Mm-hmm.
kind of be an invisible, quiet witness to what happened to him in that moment. And so there's like yeah, just these bits of like some tension, but then also the sadness and
Mm-hmm.
maybe like a small hint of danger.
Mm. What if we could just be with that sadness and that part of you that did lose connection that day? Even if you want to place a hand on your solar plexus, sending some compassion and love as you continue looking at that spot.
What's interesting is like, so in doing this too, I think there's like a lot that's like also kind of like just trapped in my head. It's kind of like that, I guess like that, it's almost like this silent witness that's up there. And so I think that's something too, where so like right now I am feeling in my body, but there is also and a lot of, yeah, just like a lot of tightness and tension in the head as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What if we could just witness that tension with just curiosity? without making it wrong or bad.
It's a hard one for me to do, and it's what I spend a lot of my days trying to find is that place of curiosity. It's hard not to be frustrated at that because that's something that's there all the time. And so usually with someone else and with help, like I can find a little bit of that.
Yeah. What if we could just witness it? Yeah, just watching it, and if at any point feels too overwhelming, just let me know.
So can I add a little piece, Andy, just as you're being curious here? It just stands out to me that your anxiety that you felt at that moment with your dad coming in and your brother saying peep is you've got two components to your anxiety for your brother and anxiety for yourself. Can you distinguish those two pieces?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure that I can pull it out like to separate it.
Can you
Um,
see it in a blurry way?
it it's more of like rather than being directed at him, it's what I'd call it is it's just a fear of what will be done or a fear of what's about to happen. And I don't necessarily like distinguish. Like I just knew like the shit was gonna hit the fan.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, and then I'm going to send it back to you, Valerie, but to me, a key piece for people with anxiety is anxiety starts with very specific things they can identify. Then it gets generalized and vague, and then it's just almost this blobby thing that what might happen that you no longer can define, you no longer can control, but it gains a power now because you can't define it or control it. Um, so I'm wondering if that's really starting to happen at that young age for you. Does that
I,
make
I think
sense?
I think like for me at that time, like because like I do have younger memories of my own of kind of being yanked into my bedroom, kind of screamed at, yelled at, hit, and then like the whole there's one thing you say that really hit me during the lift program and I forget exactly the quote, but it's like the whole like I'm gonna make you cry.
Hmm.
um that was like a good one. I actually really felt that in my throat as I heard that. And so like
Or
I think
if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think by the point of when this was happening, I was the bigger brother. I was the middle child, but the oldest boy. And I had
Mm.
my mom's body family a little bit more, which was bigger and stronger than my dad's family body. And so I was used as an example sometimes for my brother and my sister to be the one to, you know, everybody's acting up. Like, so let's use Andy as an example, but like, I definitely have these memories of like kind of being like 3-ish of kind of just being like on the floor in the bedroom after being hit, after being told that this hurts me more than it hurts you. Um, and so, like, I think that, yeah, so I think that, just dad, like the terror there wasn't as much for my brother because, like, there was a real chance that him saying peep, I could have been made the example as well. And so there was just really that overall kind of terror of like, really like the shit, knowing that it was going to hit the fan and that it was going to come. Um, yeah. I
Where are you feeling that terror now in your body?
think like I noticed that I was holding my breath and then also kind of just moving up. Like there's a lot of tension kind of with the breastbone, but then also kind of just has some clenching my neck and my jaw and my kind of my forehead again. And so kind of like just a maybe like an overall like bracing
Mm.
in a way is the word I've come to use for it.
Hmm. Yeah, so that bracing in your head and your jaw and your neck and feeling that in your chest. I want you to just witness this terror as you continue looking at that spot on the left.
I wish you hadn't said to the left because that really And I'm feeling it at like, let's still say just a three, but then looking to the left, that like it jacks it up
Mhm.
a couple of notches. Like I feel like it kind of like pulls up and just tightens a little bit more, and then there's like a coolness with it.
Just witnessing it.
Right. That was interesting because like I really felt for a minute was kind of like just the inside again, kind of like behind the breastbone, this like clenching, squeezing, twisting, torsion, but then also like kind of both again like into my throat and then really the mouth, like that scream kind of is really in like the jaw and yeah, the throat and kind of in the face, like a lot of tension and pain there. And I noticed by like there's a point like kind of sitting with it. Like I feel like there's like 15 seconds, and then I don't know if you notice, I kind of like there's a sigh, like a breath that I felt like right before I started speaking with you here again. And I like I can go like I go back, like I still yeah, I can like still really feel that tension that
So can I dissect your what's going on there just for a little bit, Andy? So to me, you've got anxiety that's there's a generalized unsafe feeling, but it's connected to dad's anger. So anger. Um, it's connected to the penalty doesn't suit the crime. This is unfair environment. Um, both of which, so angry people, unfair environments create lack of safety and anxiety. Are there any other pieces to that? What's creating the lack of safety besides dad's anger and lack of fairness? I think you mentioned earlier that as the oldest brother, you felt a sense of responsibility. You were kind of put out as the example, or the so are you carrying kind of responsibility for everybody else's safety as well? Like, can you expand on that?
yeah, it was less that I was responsible for them, but there were kind of, you know, the scapegoat dynamics. Like there's a few things that happen in childhood. One where my sister got injured and one where my brother got injured, different things. Where like 5 years ago their children came to me and there was like, "Oh, Andy, you did this to," you know, so I'm still being blamed for it. And in the time I was blamed and probably hit for it. But like I talked to my mom about it and both of those she's actually like upset at my dad. Although in the moment, you know, she always never said anything or always supported him. And so there are like these things that happened, but they weren't actually like my fault. And so I'd often like live with kind of believing that I was responsible. You know, my sister's finger got stuck in a door while we were playing. She was on the other side of the door. I didn't know she was there. Um, and but like I was the one that was blamed for it when you know, dad shouldn't have had us where we were and mom hadn't wanted it and they'd had whatever. And then another one where like my brother got something. And I think so I think there was a lot of like, you know, some of the scapegoating
Yep.
that happened. And I think that's
So,
something
so,
that's
so can I
yeah.
ask this piece? So it ties in with what Valerie said earlier, about her being raised in Judaism and her dad being a um, devout, but your dad came in and prayed with you at night and all of that. So there's that religious overtone. That was there any type of like spiritual abuse, religious trauma that contributed to the anxiety as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. So this is actually something that I've brought up, but like just starting last August was kind of the first time I started remembering this. But so we were Catholic, and I'd say we were Catholic to the nth degree. So there's an extreme amount of like body shame, human shame, being an animal shame, religious shame, sexual shame. But there was also like my mother had thought about like being a nun, and she has some OCD tendencies, and so the spirituality comes out in a very legalistic, religious way. And so the thing that came up for me in the August was kind of remembering kind of this constant state of terror I lived in because I joke there's this Santa song that if you sing it the right way, it's like how I saw God. He knows if you've been sleeping. He knows
Mm,
if you've been bad or good. And so it's like this really angry, evil Santa who's you better watch out. Um, and so, to be a little boy and then a teenage boy, and anything that's impure is evil, but also this real sense of hell, being disconnected forever, being a place where you're going to be terrorized and tortured and separated from your family, and kind of also this sense that like 90 to 98% of the world is going to rot in hell. And so if I'm not the absolute like perfect thing and, afraid for, oh no, I had a mean thought toward my sister. Now I have to say 20 prayers. And so, like, there was a place, like something that I've recently connected with and kind of have been trying to work on and connecting to. But there was this, like, kind of constant state of terror. Like, I was living in hell. And so I was in this constant state of terror, of this, like, religious hell, of complete separation and torture. Um, and so having to be perfect for that. And then I'll add to like another layer, like to the anxiety and kind of some of the abandonment is I grew up in a town of 600 people. And so the school K through 12 was all in one building. K through 6, the elementary was on one side, 7 through 12 was on the other. And my dad was a teacher who had taken it upon himself to be the school's disciplinarian. And so a lot of other kids come from complex trauma environments. Maybe they don't have a great relationship with their parents. Maybe they speak up, but then they're screamed at, yelled at, given detention by him. And so he really bullied. The way I see it now is he loved to use his position of authority to bully children. But then those children didn't want to connect with me because I might tattle. Um, or I might, and there's a lot of like some of the nicknames that he was given were like nicknames that were kind of shouted at me. And so, like, especially as a seventh and an eighth grader, I remember like, kind of in that pre puberty stage, having juniors and seniors kind of just like menace you. And so I ended up hiding out in the library. Like the safe place was like not to be in the hallway by the lockers, but it was going to be in the library reading a book. And so there's a lot of kind of like there was like no safe place because when I left home, I went to school where dad was. And I remember, I don't know how I worded it, but like there was like I knew not to get in trouble at school because like their natural healthy consequences, their natural punishments would be this, like, it'd be an inch. And then, but like anything at home would be like 1,000 times worse. And so like I had a saying of it's like it's not the fear of God that I have, but it's the fear of dad. It's like that was something that I did realize probably by the time I was like 18 or 19, um, that there was this like, I don't know, a lot of punishment.
it even sounds like just the whole undercurrent of your upbringing in school and with your father, chronic disconnection. And then, even as you're describing the shame that you experienced, I heard it in your throat, and just this theme of terror. Where do you feel, do you still feel that now in your body in that same spot?
When you ask the question, I can check into it and it kind of like, so what I'll say again is like, I do feel kind of like I don't know, almost like a coldness in the heart area. But then there is, I think one of the things that I'm working with is this chronic kind of like bodily control. And so like there's that again, there's that chronic tension in the head. So that's like always there where I used to ask meditation instructors. Like I've done meditation on and off for 25 years, done a lot of good stuff with it. But like I'd ask, like they tell you it's like, okay, focus on your breath. And then they say, don't control your breath.
Mhm.
And I asked like so many teachers, like, how do you not control your breath? Because there's like no way for me to like have my breath and my awareness and it
Mhm.
not be controlled. And I've
Mhm.
fortunately found a few people in the last years where I've gotten a little bit of help with that, but usually the like meditation teachers don't understand that. And so there's this like absolute control kind of over like masking
Mhm.
my face and then
Mhm.
but like kind of being in control of my body because again like being the bigger boy I was told that like my body was bad, it was dangerous. We weren't I was really jealous of Tim when I heard his story and he talked about like removing the furniture from the living room so they could wrestle. We if I like looked at my brother, we were screamed at not to like not to be in conflict, not to fight. And so like we weren't able to kind of explore even just like playing and play fighting with each other. And so like being in the body was like a bad thing and a dangerous thing. And so needing to be really kind of rigid and controlled to, not be punished.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like if I'm in my body, then I'm punished. And so, how would it feel to just witness that tension in the head, that tension in your chest, just for a moment as you look to the left at that spot? We're holding space for this, not trying to logic our way out of it, just witnessing those sensations because this little boy just wants to be heard.
So as I do that, kind of the physical sensation, so again, kind of in the middle of my chest, but then also like I can feel a lot of stuff on my forehead, but then that internal, and I think for a moment, like kind of sitting with the physical, but then like there was a point where I really got where there was like, it's like what I hear and kind of sense is just this like wail of like a kind of like this, I don't want to use the word whining, like a whining kind of a wail of just like a pain. It was like something that went in there. But like I allowed that to like just go for a few seconds as it like came up.
Can I
Yeah.
ask how you feel towards that little boy that's whining?
That's a good question because I think I've done a lot of work. When I started to do parts work and like the John Bradshaw and stuff, I had my mom send me photos of me at certain ages. And there's one of me age 4 where I can like it's at Christmas and with the family, and I can just see the tension and anxiety on my face that I'm like kind of really just grinning and bearing it and trying to be pleasing for the adults. And like I really uh, I really hated that boy. And I've done with a lot of the parts work that I do with people. I think like Valerie really spoke to a part of this before, but kind of like that survival. you know, it's like natural to be survival. And I talk about like, what you did, it helped you to survive even just one more day with the authority figures. And so I still have a difficult relationship with it because there is like, it's like that 4-year-old is the part that's hating, that's doing the act of hating. Um, and so it's to use the tools that were given to you. But that, by hating myself, I made myself small and quiet, and I would sit on I spent my entire childhood reading, and I wouldn't, by not making noise, I wasn't seen, and then I was hit a lot less, and so I was able to see how that hate saved me from probably hundreds of being terrorized, being hit, being kind of yanked and tossed into my room. And so like I still have a mixed relationship with it, but I've been able to to learn to be with it a little bit and to give some compassion.
So Valerie, we got about 5 minutes. So
Mhm.
this has been wonderful, but just summarize kind of where you would take Andy next, both kind of somatic stuff, hypnotherapy stuff,
Mhm.
um, brain spotting, whatever. Just kind of lay out the path that you would be looking at as a therapist.
Yeah, so I would have him complete that response and continue to look at that spot and just witnessing those sensations and also just validating that I can totally understand where the complex relationship with that younger part of you and also acknowledging how intelligent your body is for doing that response, making yourself small. And I would also, more towards the end, like have you tune into this 4-year old that is grinning and bearing, like, what does he want to share with you? And earlier you mentioned, like, in the back of your throat, almost like you wanted to scream. I would have you complete that response. It's a lot working more with the body and what's coming up. So I would have him complete that brain spotting session. And then also there's usually music that helps you process even deeper. Um, and that really gets into those deeper parts of the brain, the bilateral stimulation. So I would continue doing that and continue helping your body feel safe, um, and through different somatic exercises to connect you to your body. And then definitely like a hypnosis recording for you to listen to on rewiring your beliefs, like feeling safer to expand, feeling safe to use your voice, feeling safe to express your truth, feeling lovable, feeling good enough, and even just maybe a visualization of connecting with that younger part and bringing him to a place now where you feel safe or safer, or even with a person, an animal, connecting to that, or even connecting to mentors like Tim in these visualizations to help anchor in this new sense of safety.
Could I ask you one question with
Oh,
that? So
please
just as
do.
a so I have aphantasia,
Okay.
and what that is I have no visual memory. Like if I close my eyes, I just see the backs of my eyelids. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm unable, but this is why like I moved from IFS to
Mm-hmm.
my own like somatic parts work,
Mm-hmm.
because like I can't, you mentioned earlier visualizing a beach as being a safe place. Like I can't visualize a beach as a safe
Mm-hmm.
place or connect to kind of visual work.
And that's also super common. You don't have to visualize it. It's more about the feeling. You're maybe it's I feel when I think about Tim, or I think about other mentors, or you think about this younger part, thinking of how you'd like to feel. You're listening, and also other people have different strengths. Like some people don't have visuals at all, and it's more like they feel it kinesthetically in their body. And so you don't need to visualize either. So, if that's not available to you, it's more about the feelings, especially for this young child. It also sounds like there's pre-verbal trauma that he endured. So, and, when you're from 0 to 3 years old, you don't have an ability to think consciously. It's just sensations and feelings. So that's perfectly normal and totally okay.
So, Valerie, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you do this. And Andy, thank you for being willing to do this. Valerie, if people, I think this is going to help a lot of people that are watching, and they're going to want to know how to get more information about you and just learn about kind of what you do. How do they find that out?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. That's my number one spot to be. That's Heal with Val, HEAL with VAL. Or you could check out my podcast that I did with Tim. We talked about how to break your attraction to emotionally unavailable partners, and that was such a great episode. And that's my podcast on the Anxiety Recovery Podcast. So those are some ways to connect with me.
Super. Andy, any final closing comments?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions for you that were more yeah, more broadly based off of stuff for our clients and stuff. But I didn't expect but found it interesting the direction we took. And so I appreciate you offering your wisdom and your insight to me specifically. And I hope that this is something that it could like help other people out there. And I really appreciated you sharing your story and your own openness and vulnerability and talking about your own journey and your healing journey. And so thank you for sharing with us today. Um, and I'm trying to come back to a different state to go to my
Mhm.
my prepared closing statements. And so I just want to say that we're grateful for you joining us today. And to everyone listening, wherever you are in your own healing journey, just to know that change is possible and that you're not broken and you're not alone. And thank you for spending this time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you, Andy, for being so open, and Tim for asking all of you for both of you asking such amazing questions. You guys just hold such beautiful space, and I just know that this is going to really resonate with people who are working through anxious attachment and trauma, and I think it'll be so valuable for people. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.